Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to our first in our winter lecture series. It's certainly wintry outside. Life in the Garden with design legend Bunny Williams. I'm Jennifer Bernstein, and I'm the president and CEO here at the New York Botanical Garden. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that NYBG is located in the ancestral homeland of the Lenape, Delaware people. We honor them and acknowledge their displacement, dispossession, and continued presence. Today, our very special guest is Bunny Williams, author, entrepreneur, award-winning designer, philanthropist, and longtime friend of the New York Botanical Garden. A native of Charlottesville, Virginia, Bunny began her career at Stair & Company, the prestigious English antiques dealer, followed by 22 years with the venerable firm Parrish Hadley Associates. In 1988, Bunny started her own firm, which now employs more than a dozen designers and assistants, and she's been expanding her empire ever since. For 25 years, she and her husband owned Treillage, a much-loved decorative home and garden shop, and in 2008, she launched Bunny Williams Home. Bunny is a prolific author whose work has been published around the world in both print and online. She has received numerous awards and honors, including the Interior Design Hall of Fame, House Beautiful Giants of Design, Elle Decor's A-List, Timeless Design Award from the Royal Oak Society, Living Landmarks from the New York Landmarks Conservancy, the Étoile Award from the Savannah College of Art and Design, and several Design Innovator Awards from Connecticut Cottage and Gardens. She's been named to the AD 100 list and has served as chairman of the Kips Bay Designer Show House several years running. She is a busy woman. Throughout a career that spans more than 6 decades, she has designed exquisitely beautiful interiors and gardens, but it is beauty in the service of others, for hospitality and generosity are the cornerstones of her work. She is always looking to the future, incorporating modern styles and technology in her designs and in how she connects to her audience. Change is constant. Today, Bunny will give us a tour of her beloved garden, her happy place, and how it has changed over the years and throughout the seasons. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones before we begin and join me in welcoming Bunny Williams.
Those introductions make me realize how long I've been doing this. But I want to thank everybody at the Continuing Education for asking me here, and your graciousness and hospitality has been wonderful. And I particularly want to thank all of you for coming on this cold, cold day. The only thing that, if you're a gardener, that we can be happy is that we have snow on the ground, our plants are tucked away, and waiting for spring to arrive. So I'm usually everybody says it's so cold, and I said, well, no, I like the snow cover, it's good for the garden. John and I bought this property in Falls Village, Connecticut 40 years ago. And I really bought it because I wanted to garden. I was not married to John at the time. My first husband, it was probably over this house we got a divorce because all I wanted to do was garden. But he didn't get that. But anyway, I always thought if I am gonna have a garden, I want to be in a place that I will be in forever. Because when you plant that tree and it's 2 feet tall, it's going to take 25 years for it to look like something. And after that 25 years, you don't dare want to leave it. So I found this funny house, and it's a wonderful federal house that sat on, it's now the property covers about I own houses on both sides of the road. So I have about 22 acres, and we're gardening about 12 of it. And the house was rather run down. It was, I didn't have to do a lot to the house, but the property, it was a rooming house, and it was very sad. You can see the back of it. My father took one look and said, "I'm glad you're young." And I always say when I wrote the book, An Affair with a House, I said, it's like all affairs. You never see the bad parts in the beginning. And so I bought this house. I fell in love with it. I just thought it was magic. And it's always been a house that and I talk about this in the book, it's been a place to gather my family over the years. And it's really sort of our home base. And there were no gardens. There was nothing. There was this one beautiful big maple tree that unfortunately I'm not sure will live out my lifetime. But this was the back, and there was a porch across the back, but it needed work. So I started by, I always think you start a garden in the house. You look out the window where you're going and coming. You need to have a connection. A house needs to have a connection to the outside. And so you look out a window and what do you see, or what door do you go out? So you come out the back of the house. There's a terrace now under the big maple tree. And there was no lawn. When I went to see the house the first time, the grass was about 3 feet tall. And like all of us now, we're so concerned with water. We've reduced the amount of lawn we have considerably. And this seems all summer, we just mow, we let the grass get tall to get as much moisture as possible. And if we have a dry spell, so what? It gets dry. And so I've reduced, there are few places that I need lawn, but I really think we have to reduce what we do. My first garden that I created was this garden, and I was gardening myself. So I had 2 borders. They were 50 feet long, and 2 perennial borders. I did put in the stone wall and this stupid little pool in the middle. But I was happy as a clam because I was just working, and every weekend I'd go to work, and then I'd come back and work and plant and dig and whatever. And I realized after a number of years that this garden had no soul. It really was just nothing but me working in a very boring garden. And I realized this because I started traveling. Every trip I took was to go look at gardens. And what you realize that great gardens are about the plants and about design. They go hand in hand. Every single great garden has a basis of design. And I, being a designer, realized that I needed to have structure in my garden and then incorporate the plants. And so I was always inspired by going to look at these. This is a Russell Page garden in Belgium, going to Hidcote, looking at these borders. And I would come home and I'd go, your garden is really boring. So one year, it was probably about 12 years ago, I came back and I ripped everything up in the middle. And this is my 2 perennial borders and what it looks like today. All the grass came out. I put paths, I created more borders, and it finally I did the big arborvitaes in the middle that we keep trimmed as columns. The fish pond's still there, that dinky little fish pond, but now it has a sense of place in the garden. And finally, this is a garden that I really enjoy being in. The borders are huge. They are, we have to add, like in a lot of gardens in Connecticut, you do have to add annuals to keep it blooming all year round. So we're always putting in nicotiana, ageretums, more lilies, castor beans, things to give it scale and to keep the bloom going for the entire season, because it's sort of hard just with the perennials. We don't water a lot here. We enrich right at the end of the seasons when we cut back, we put huge amount of leaf mold over the gardens, covered thick, and it makes the soil rich and it holds the moisture. So the borders almost never have to be watered. I said to someone, people are talking about natives, and I said, well, I'm half native. I have parts in my garden that are native, but in a perennial border, you don't want invasives and you don't want plants that take over, but I still love so many different plants, so we add those to the garden. And it's the scale. My house is tall, and I think that I wanted a feeling of scale in the plants. So, there's Joe Pye weed, there are even torturas that have vines growing of it. So when you walk into the garden, there's this kind of wonderful feeling that you're in a space and in a room. Throughout the book, I've tried to list the plants I love. This book has been fun because it's been a family effort. My nephew, who lives now on the guest house, he and his wife, my niece, he's an incredible photographer. So he's photographed all the plants. And I've listed throughout the book some of my favorite plants, because people are always asking, well, what do you love? But you can see the scale and how the big cannas and everything give a texture. I think that's the hardest thing in planting a perennial border, is not only the color palette, but the textures. And it's often hard when you're buying this tiny little plant to really know what it's going to do. And we move things around. And then the pond has water lilies and different water plants that go around our giant fish. This garden, I think that in a garden, you want to, if you're moving to another place, you want to have a sense of arrival. And I call it the doorways. So this is leading from the sunken garden. There's an arbor through the hedge, and there's a glimpse beyond. And this area I started working on about maybe 8 years ago, because I collected antique birdhouses, and I just love them. And they were these old apple trees. So I started cleaning it up. We've just planted, it's all grass, and it's a place where the birds come, I can sit, and these are all filled with these old birdhouses that I collected. In the last year, and I don't have a new picture of it, but I had a great nephew, and so it's now it now has a seesaw, a swing, and a sandbox. So it will be used more this summer with the kids. But the grasses come. There are some wonderful shrubs that have berries and things that attract the birds. And it's funny because you come sit back. Somebody said, do the birds live in the birdhouses? And I said, no, I think they think it's suburbia. But when you sit back there, it's like a symphony of birds. So they quite like the space. So they're the houses and this rustic bench is a wonderful place. I think every place in a garden needs places to sit because you'll stay in it and enjoy it more. And on the garden trips, on the travels, everywhere I went, I would come back with something that inspired me. And this has, to me, been as much of my education as anything. And going to see in Italy these incredible hedges and how spaces were created with greenery. This is Gambaria. And I came back and looked at my property because I had this lawn and it just didn't have any edge. And I'd also seen these wonderful gardens in Belgium of the Verts brothers. So I planted this double curving hedge that is in the back of the house. There's just, the lawn is in between. I actually used that space for a party. My nephew got married there. We had a tent in it. That's all in the book. But I wanted a room. It's a green room. There's not a plant in it. There's some containers, and always you'll see through the garden somehow an object to draw your eye so that you think, oh, what's that? I'm going to walk down the path. This hedge it's only taken about 10 years, and I started with a 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, so I kind of got the shape, and with really strong pruning, it filled in fairly quickly. The back side of the house, I have these are one of the first things I ever put in. I bought these topiaries from a man in Hawthorne Circle who grew the topiaries for all the estates in Long Island, and he was going out of business, so we bought them. I think the one on the end was a bird, but we sort of lost the skill of making the bird. But they've been there literally for about 38 years. And that led from that garden, I get one done and I'm like, okay, what's next? And so there's a path that leads you down to, there was an old barn on the property, and it leads, I wanted to pass, so you now have a sense of arrival. You come down this path into what's the parterre garden. This garden actually years ago, and things change on your property, this area a number of years ago was my vegetable garden and the compost bin. It was kind of rustic because it was attached to what in those days was really a working barn. And I decided that I wanted to change it. And every year it has tulips for the spring. We plant the tulips, we have to lift them, sort of ridiculous, but they're beautiful in the spring. And then in the summer, it's planted with different annuals, and each year, or in the winter, we decide what color combinations that we're going to do. And they're dwarf Korean lilac standards, and the arbor in the middle is covered with vines. Again, giving a garden height, because you're always looking down, and I think if you can think of putting things that draw your eye up, it makes it more interesting. This is the old brick paths, and originally these are really old bricks, and these was all vegetables and a compost bin at the end. But just going back to this picture, this was a barn, and one day I was going to the grocery store, and I went up Route 7, and leaning against this junk shop were these 3 windows. It had come off a conservatory in the Hudson River. I did a U-turn, and I said, "What are those windows? They're so beautiful." And he said, "Well, they came off this conservatory." And I said, "Well, how long are they?" And he said, "Well, we measured them. They were 32 feet. I had a little greenhouse on the back of this bed, a little shed greenhouse that was 32 feet long. So I could use the foundation, and I took it off, and I built this conservatory. And this has been probably my favorite room in the whole house. It's beautiful year-round, except it was so cold at Christmas that we had dinner in there one night, and I had to give everybody a blanket. We had heaters running, so right now it's too cold to use it at night, but during the day it warms up with the sun, and it's filled with plants that go in and out of the greenhouse. The vines are jasmine, all the vines are growing up over it, and we entertain in here a lot. We have dinners, lunches. The summer, we're in here all the time. And during the day, it's over Christmas, we were there for lunch. We had Christmas lunch in here. And it sort of just changed the whole property. And when we did this, I wanted to formalize the parterre garden. We also restored the barn, and we had to build another space for all the equipment. And so I got that done. And one day I started looking at the rest of the property, and there was a woodland area, a high hill. You didn't even go up there. It was just nothing. And I started walking up and trying to make a path through it. And I put in these steps. I call this my Italian moment. So I felt like every time I go to Italy and I want some cypress trees, this is the closest I'm going to get to it. And so you walk up these steps, and you walk up. I had to kind of cut branches and make a path, but you come up to what is now the Woodland Garden. When I started this, and again, this is all about education and learning, when I started it many, many years ago, I think I thought of it more as a shade garden. I mean, I called it the Woodland, but I was like, I don't think I knew what a woodland garden really meant. And so there are things in here that are not native to the woods. The second half of this garden I've made all native. It's got to be things that you find in the woods, all native. I had to get rid of tons of invasives in here that were there. And the thing about getting rid of invasives, you never really get rid of them. So everybody says it's a constant maintenance. It's not something that's easy to care for, but we're diligent about it. You can't let it get over, out of control. But it's a long, you go up it through the woods, it's a long haul, but it's one of my favorite parts of the garden. Years and years ago, I started buying, there's a wonderful nursery, Hillside Nursery, and I met him at Trade Secrets, and I started buying obovata peonies from him. I didn't know what they were. And he said, if they like it in your woodland, they will be very happy. If they don't like it, they won't do anything. And they're this species peony. I'm sure you've seen them. They're the most ephemeral thing. Their bloom is like tissue paper. It lasts for 2 seconds. And you have to go out and just stand there because it's going to be gone tomorrow. But it's my favorite thing. And now the birds love it. So there are millions. I mean, they're all over. They take them, the birds and the squirrels, and they drop them, whatever. And they really love the garden. And it's been, it's now, I let things go. I love things that spread, that naturalize. But as I say, everything that gets added is things that you would find. And I don't want to have to water. We don't use any pesticides. One thing that we do with this whole woodland garden is when it's all over and, frost has come. It's mowed down, not mowed, but it's cut down and chewed, and everything goes back into the soil. So this garden, when I first started, had horrible soil. I didn't know enough that I should be doing something. Now the soil's really rich and things really love it. I also, it's like education. I started out and I thought, oh, I want to have mountain laurel. Well, it hates it. I'm on Lyme. So all my mountain laurel that I planted died. So now what I do, if I want to introduce something new, I try to buy bare root things. I buy like 6 or 7 things of bare root and plant them and see what they do. See if they, and actually bare root plants come back faster than a bigger plant. And if they come back and thriving, then I know I can add to it, because you want big masses of plants, not just individuals. When I walked up through this property in the beginning, the one reason I wanted to develop it is that there was this bowl, there was a sunken area, and these rocks with a tree growing out of it. So I created a pond. We don't have water on the property, but the waterfall comes down and sounds wonderful. And it looks quite natural, though. It's all man-made. I love the perennial that grow, and some come back and some don't. I usually have to add to them, but they are wonderful reflected in the water. And again, throughout the book, you will see pictures and plant lists of some of my favorite plants. And so then I had a property next door that I actually had to add. I didn't own this piece of property. And I bought it. And John and I were, when we had our shop triage, we were in France. And John said, I think we need a swimming pool. And I'm like, okay. And so we were in this stone yard, and there was these beautiful limestone coping that came from a French bassin. And he said, wouldn't this be a beautiful coping for a swimming pool? Well, I don't really love swimming pools, particularly in Connecticut where you swim 2 months. So I don't want to be looking at a big blue swimming pool the rest of the time. So I thought, I'm going to put it up on the top of the hill. I want a stone wall, so I want it to look kind of natural, but we're going to need a pool house because it's too far away from the house. And I had seen this porch, and I thought, Falls Village is filled with Greek Revival architecture. And I thought, I want a Greek Revival temple made of wood, because the original Greek temples were made of wood. So I got one of Gil Schaefer. I said, Gil, please give me the perfect proportions of a temple. I need to know the size of the column, the frieze, the pediment. I want to get the proportions right. And then I found this wonderful builder who's kind of an artistic builder to build this rusticated temple, which became the pool house. But what I love is that you walk up through the field with the grass path, a mowed grass path, the high grass frame it, and you're walking up through the orchard to the pool house. The field, the orchard, which we're talking about meadows. I think meadow gardens are really a nightmare. But under our, the care they take is unbelievable. Everybody says, I want a meadow garden. I said, really? We have a field. And the only thing I wanted growing in the field was Queen Anne's lace. So we have gotten the Queen Anne's lace. And of course, other milkweed comes back. I mean, things do show up. But I wasn't going to do a big meadow garden. So when we restored the barn, it's in one of my books, I had to build a barn. And interesting enough, this is the part of the garden I probably spend more time than anything, because we built the barn, which holds the tractor, the machinery, all the back stuff that you need in a garden. But this is where the cutting vegetable garden is, and my big greenhouse. The greenhouse literally was bought from a greenhouse supply place. I always say to John, when you win that lottery, I want the glass greenhouse, but until then, this one's doing just fine. And it produces amazing things. I mean, it's filled now, the geraniums are in bloom, the orchids are coming in bloom, and what I love is that we can rotate this, take it to the house, so the house is always filled with plants, and they're everywhere, because I want to go see them, but I also, when I don't have flowers to cut from in the house, I love to bring all the different collections of plants in. And it's been an amazing working greenhouse that really is phenomenal. The citrus, I think these I don't understand. I thought fruit trees only bloom once. These lemons are blooming 12 months a year. We're always, I mean, I have to think of things to do with lemons because there's so many, but the scent in the greenhouse is just fabulous. And again, a number of the great plants that we grow in the greenhouse. The potting table, where there's a big thing with potting soil, so you've got to have space to work. And outside of it is the vegetable cutting garden. And this is where we are all the time, picking vegetables, cutting the flowers, do the flowers inside. And there's so much to do. I mean, tying up the tomatoes, just tilling, staking, cutting. So we're all sort of in the summer seem to be in this part of the garden during the day because it requires the most maintenance in a funny way, but one that I love. Tricia Van Oors, who people ask me this. I have a head gardener, Robert Reimer, and this whole garden is taken care of by Robert and Gregorio, they're there full-time year-round. They do the pruning, orchard, everything. And Robert's wife, Tricia, helps me in the vegetable garden one day a week, and she's always telling me new seeds and new vegetables that I should try. So we've listed a lot of them in the book. This is a potting shed that I actually moved from another part of the property, and this is where I get to keep a lot of my old watering cans that I don't use. But I collect all these implements because I think they're so beautiful. So it sort of comes a museum of garden things that aren't practical anymore. The pots are stored in the barn. We're always, I don't know, we have all these pots and we never seem to have the right size or enough. But, and then we harvest the onions and the tomatoes. We're still, even now, we had potatoes and onions that we're able to store and eat all through the year, which is fantastic. Actually, I had to order some more pots the other day, if you could believe it, because in the winter we have to pot up things in the greenhouse. That's one of the big winter projects because things get too small. So then you need the other size pot, and maybe you don't have that. So it's always the end. And I think every part of the garden should be beautiful. I've always loved. I remember years ago going to one of the English gardens, and I got lost in the back area, and it fascinated me where the wheelbarrows were because it was all so beautiful. I mean, there's nothing prettier than a neat wood pile and wheelbarrows and things like that. And then on these are some of my other thing that I love more than anything is cutting flowers. So we grow a lot, and there's a little vignette of my flower arranging room with all my old containers and vases. I go to tag sales, buy lots of cracked china things because I'm probably going to crack it some more when I do the flower arrangement. So that's where I get to use some really nice things. I love doing flowers. The flowers get cut on Thursday, get stuck in water, and then I do them on Friday for the house and tables and for having people for dinner. We always do one huge flower arrangement in the barn. This is the inside of the barn where the conservatory is. And this is everybody wants to do this arrangement. I want to do it, Robert wants to do it, Jen wants to do it. So we sort of have contests we give it off to everybody because you kind of need a ladder to do it. And I'm very critical, so but it's fun. We all love the competition. And I'm doing them, I do flowers quickly, and it's just wonderful to have them around the house. This is the ugliest building you've ever seen that I bought because it was so ugly. I didn't want anybody it was next to my pool house, and I didn't want anybody who liked that building to be my neighbor. And if you know what I mean. And I said, I've got to buy this building. John said, and everybody said, what are you buying? I said, wait, one thing I've always wanted, and I did this before COVID, I needed a studio. I really needed a place to work. I mean, my house is fine, but it's like your living room. Are you going to leave all your papers out, your paints? So you tend not to do it. And I did this before COVID, and lo and behold, I lived in that house for the longest I've ever lived in it, 2.5 years. I learned to work from Zoom on the computer. I did 2 projects out of it from remote, and I really got to use this space. But it was a very ugly A-frame, and I changed all the windows, and I created this courtyard so it had an entrance. The door wasn't in this place. This was a mud basement, and so I wanted to come in on the ground floor. So I found these tiles that look like stone. There's very low ceiling. So you come in through the lower level. I wanted this to be a more contemporary space than my house. I wanted it clean and edgy a little bit, so I have a glass railing. And then you go up to this one giant room. And what's wonderful, you sit high on the hill, so I get to look over the garden. I can work and look down at the hill through the orchard, the greenhouse, the barn, and it gives me a view up high of the property. And it's where I have my garden books, design books. I paint, draw up here. I have flat files for plans. I was saying that I came out to the botanical garden to take the herbarium course because I was determined to do a herbarium of all the plants in my garden. Well, unfortunately, I couldn't get to every course. I loved it. I was traveling and I didn't make every one. So I have to come back and finish the course so I can do that. But I have all the equipment for it. Of course, I went and bought everything to do it. I also need the time to do it. This is the other end with a fireplace. So last weekend, I was up here with the snow falling and looking at books and planning what we're going to do. It's just a nice, big, light space and a place I can make a mess and walk away and leave it. The books, the work table to work at, and I'm always going back. Education, always going back and looking at books. I'm always cutting things. I'm trying to go through my old magazines, as you see, and cut out the pictures I want and make scrapbooks so I come back to look at them. A couple of years ago, I decided, he's 95, and I decided we needed a downstairs bedroom. And if we're going to stay in this house forever, so we added on this room. And what I love is it gave me another place to bring plants into. So we made this, what we call bed sit. So it's half sitting room, it's got a big TV. We entertain in here, but then it's got a big bed, and it was supposed to be, but John doesn't like it. So he likes to sit in it, but he doesn't want to sleep in it. So it's here for the time that we may absolutely have to have it. But it's a wonderful, cozy, fabulous room. And again, you can see all through the seasons, it's filled with plants. The orchids are in, geraniums, and it's why it's so nice to have the greenhouse. The other side of the room with our paintings. I'm always buying pictures of things we like, dogs, flowers, what else? What else is there? Anyway, and then the other thing I always love in a garden are containers. This is the one, it's actually, I was saying, this is the one thing that I have to cut back on because of watering. Containers need water. And this summer, when we were having a drought and it wasn't toward the end of the summer, I said, I'm not sure we should keep doing this because I'm so concerned about water. I'm obsessed. When I drive down Route 20 and see there's no water in the reservoir, I've never seen that in 40 years. And you're like, if you don't think there's a problem, just go look at some reservoirs. And so I may have to cut back on these, but these are all these plants, the orchids and things, and they often go up into the greenhouse, the begonias, but we often around the property do these containers with the morning glories and all the different annuals that just add, and I always say if you don't have a garden, you could have a small container garden and have so much fun with it with different vines and bulbs and plants. They're everywhere and they make an accent. These are my magnolias. I grew up in Virginia and I always wanted Magnolia grandiflora, which I wasn't able to grow, but I think probably we could grow now. But these go up in the greenhouse. But I said to Robert, I bet you we could leave these out now because climate, we were in another zone. These are not grandifloras, but these two go up into the greenhouse now, the oleander. But they warm up the front of the barn. during the season. By our back door, I have this old plant stand, and I'm sure I bought this at the New York Botanical Garden Antique Show one year. So many of the things that I have came from here. But we do the coleus and begonias, and I'd love to do a color palette, so there's not too many colors, but it's all a shade of something. So we change that out. And again, just walking through the garden, you're going up to the woodland, and there's this big stone urn that I have that we fill with summer annuals. It's right now it's empty, but it just makes a wonderful kind of spot and an interest moving through the garden. These big urns that came from John's shop with pedestals with big ferns in it. It just accents the side of the building, and it's why I loved. And you can see on this picture the orange trees and all the citrus come out. Most of the plants in the greenhouse, the big plants, all have a place around the property. And this is John and I sitting in the garden, enjoying the garden. And I would just like to say one thing. I hope many of you, if you can, you're welcome to come and see the garden. The garden's open for several days with the Garden Conservancy. It's open before the event Trade Secrets that we put on in May, which if you're really passionate gardeners, you have to come to Trade Secrets. It's a charity event for unusual plants and antique garden ornaments in Lime Rock, Connecticut. It's really very special. And I also would extend an invitation to the educational department that anytime you'd like to put a group together to come to the garden, we'd love to have you. So please come and join us and enjoy the garden with us. Thank you all so much for coming, and